Hello, everyone, and welcome into the Autzen Audibles podcast. I am your host, Jared Mack. With me today is Erik Skopil. We both work for 24/7 Sports and DuckTerritory.com. And today, Eric, I think we should go over a little spring game action. Oregon held their annual spring game on Saturday, April 26th, this previous weekend. Um, a lot happened, a lot didn't happen. But first, how are we doing today?
I'm good, man. I spent way too much time on Monday watching and then writing like 4,000 words about this spring game. I think I overdid it probably, but hopefully that means I've got some fun things to talk about on the show. And Jared, I'm excited to hear your spring game thoughts because I was thinking about this as we were getting ready. I haven't really had a chance to debrief. We talked in the press box. Unfortunately, you had a
Mhm.
baseball game to bounce to like right afterwards, so I haven't really had a chance to pick your brain. So this is going to be fresh, which maybe will be kind of fun here. I doubt we're going to like disagree on too much, but maybe there'll be a couple things that you picked up that I didn't, and it'll be fun to kind of go back and forth. So let's get into it.
Yeah, what do we want to start first with? We go O or D?
Let's start. Am I selfish
Okay.
because I'm the offensive guy for wanting to start on my
No,
side of the
totally
ball?
fine.
Okay,
No, because I've got some thoughts.
let's hit it.
Yeah,
What do
let's
you got?
start offense. Um, I'm not sure where to begin. I think probably just quarterback plays, probably the likely or the best option, I should say here, just because that's the most important position on the field. Um, Austin Novosad, Dante Moore, Akili Smith Jr., Brock Thomas, Luke Moga. I will say the most impressive player of the day was Luke Moga, hands down, no questions asked. Not because he's going to start, not because he's actually going to play this season. It's because the very clear development of him as a pocket passer and a quarterback out in the run was incredibly obvious on Saturday. He made a lot of throws outside the pocket. He actually drove the ball. His throwing motion just looked better than what we saw last year during the spring
So
game. Go ahead.
so much better. I was just gonna say so
Yeah,
much better, Jared. A total agreement.
he's in way more smooth than he was a year ago, and that's always what you hope for in these development systems like Oregon. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But what he's always had is an innate natural athleticism. Like, he was one of the fastest people on the team last season. He's a quarterback, which is always an intriguing concept. But, in order to make those two things work, you have to throw the ball. You have to be able to drive it to the outside. You have to be able to take some reads. I thought he looked really good. And dare I say, excited for his future? Question mark. Like,
Can,
uh,
are,
you
we,
know,
are, are we allowed to be? I think so.
I think so. He's still on the team, and hopefully, yeah, a year or two from now, if Dante Moore and Austin Novosad are done or transferred or gone in the NFL, like there could be a window there where Luke Moga could be battling for a QB spot. But I just wanted to give him some shouts. I didn't think I'm sure a lot of people didn't think that we would be starting this spring game review podcast with Luke Moga, but I thought he was the most impressive quarterback. And then on like for the other guys, for specifically Novosad and Moore, like Novosad had the better stats, but he had the better offensive line. And I really wish that we could have seen Dante Moore perform with said offensive line, with the Fighting Ducks offensive line that consisted of like three starters and a guy like Matthew Bedford who had started for multiple years in Indiana, and um, I forgot the other member of his offensive line, but still it was like it was
Kavika.
Janoris Wilson was his right tackle.
Yeah, Kavika. Yeah, Kavika left and Janoris right tackle. Yep.
Yeah, that was a legitimate starting for most teams in the country offensive line with Isaiah World protecting him. So I thought he would look good though. I still think Dante Moore is the vastly superior quarterback and will be Oregon's starter going into next year. I just think that he's got much better natural talent, and it just wasn't on display because for a couple of his drives, he had like five true freshmen or redshirt freshman offensive linemen going against plenty of starting caliber defensive lineman prospects on the Fighting Ducks team. I still thought that his layered throws looked really nice, and his arm strength when he showed it off was good. He had that interception at the end of the game, but who really cares what that was? That was just a last second play. But I still thought that he's going to be the guy. I just would have liked to have seen him with a better offensive line, and that might have. I think we talked about this in the press box. That might have been by design, but we'll never know.
Yeah, there are a lot of things we'll never know, that included. Total agreement on a lot of that. Luke Moga was somebody, just to stay there, because
Mhm.
I talked about it on the post game with Matt on Saturday. Uh, he was 7 for 13 and yet, or 6 for 13, and yet I'm here saying I think the accuracy is so much better. And on rewatch, that totally lines up. I tracked it. He had 7 incompletions, 2 were drops. One was that pretty brutal Malik Benson drop that would have been a 75-yard touchdown. And then we're having a totally different conversation because his stat line would have been significantly better than anybody else. 4 were throwaways, which were like good decisions. Like no one was there. He rolled out. He put the ball in places that no one else could get to. And then was probably the other one was probably like the most interceptable non-intercepted pass of the day. We threw it over the middle, I think, to
Over the
his tight
middle,
end.
yeah.
Yeah, and it was kind of like it was in a scary part of the field. Didn't end up being intercepted or really much of a play made on it, but it was in a weird spot. But like you read through that and you think about, as a guy who was a sub 50% completion percentage quarterback in high school, gosh, the
Mhm.
throws he missed even were good. You know what I mean? Like the throws he hit and connected on were great. Like I did my 5 favorite throws of the day. Two of them were Luke's, 2 of them were Dante's, one of them was Austin's. We can, if you want, I can go through how I ranked them and why. But like I just thought like there was a lot of high end throws from a lot of guys, and that was one of my big takeaways. Like this room has a ton of talent. Like all 5 quarterbacks that came in looked good at times. And made some nice plays. And I certainly don't think, kind of what you alluded to earlier, that like my tenor for this competition has really changed at all. I still think it's Dante Moore, Austin Novosad, Luke Moga, but I'm now kind of in the I guess the sitting in the seat of, man, I feel like they could win games with multiple of these guys if they were needed to. And I wasn't necessarily sure I'd feel that way. And Moga in particular makes me feel like, gosh, they're a lot deeper here than I thought. I don't know what it would look like with Luke for a full game, and maybe some of the warts would come back out. But gosh,
Probably, yeah.
for a couple of hours in a spring game against the competition he was going against, which again, a lot of elite players in the field, like, damn, did he look the part. So yeah, this quarterback room is really healthy. I think if you just were stat gazing or didn't watch the game, like, shame on you for not watching your team's spring game, but also like, no, like a lot of this looked a lot better than maybe some of the stats indicate. Because I know it's not flashy, like no one threw for 200 yards, but a lot of guys got in, a lot of guys looked good, a lot of guys were able to drive their team down the field and finish it with scores. So a ton to like here. Jared, do you want me to run through my 5 favorite throws?
I was gonna ask, yeah, but real quick on one thing. Like, this is at the end of the day still glorified spring practice. Like this,
Yep.
the point of spring practices are to get everybody reps, and Dan has preached about that. Doing the 2 field drills with I can get 117 million people on the field at the same time, but that's true. It's like they want to go out there and get as many people to practice as possible. So we knew going into the game, like, we weren't going to see a lot of Dante Moore and Austin Novosad. We saw more of people who might need more reps than the other person. And that was kind of the case with Luke Moga, but I still was really impressed with him. But I feel like if he were to, play a real game, some of those warts might come out. But that's okay. He's a redshirt freshman.
He's a
But
redshirt freshman, and hopefully by the time he does play, they're not there still, right?
right, yeah. So the throws.
All right, I'll go 5-1. My number 5 is actually Moga's throw, and actually about half of these were not completions because players dropped the pass. But
Nice.
Moga's sideline bomb to Malik Benson, I thought, for me, just I didn't know he had both the arm strength and the touch. That ball was really well placed, about 40 yards downfield. Again, should have been a 75-yard touchdown. We'll talk about a lot of the players that had good days. One of them that didn't was Malik Benson, who had 2 possible touchdowns, one of which he dropped, the other of which was broken up by Liam Offord on a really good play, but still, that was tough. 4, I went Dante Moore's back shoulder throw to Jurion on the sideline. I thought that was good anticipation. I thought it was really well placed. It also followed a kind of a bummer of a play where he looked like he hit Kyler Casper for a touchdown, and it didn't. It wasn't a touchdown, so I was excited to see him
Good play
bounce
from
back.
Florence.
It was a great play from Florence, and we'll get to that throw later because it's also on my list. But I just thought that was a nice ball, and like I was also aided by the fact that, hey, Jurion Dickey did a thing, and that sort of matters.
Yeah.
Number 3, I went with Moga's pass to Dylan Gresham on the where Gresham dived. The ball placement on that was like spectacular, I thought. And again, this is a guy who accuracy was my main concern with Luke. He's known to have a strong arm, known to be obviously a really fast quarterback, good athlete. But I just thought that was a lot of nice touch, nice loft on that one, put it right where it needed to be made, and Dylan went up and made a great catch. Number 2, I went with Novosad's sideline pass to Decorian on that first drive. I thought that was probably the best placed deep ball maybe of the group, and right on the money for about 40 yards downfield. So a really nice ball there. And then my number 1, and it was largely just because of what was going on in front of him, was that Dante Moore pass to Kyler where he dropped it. Just because Elijah Rushing, and I think watching it live, I didn't appreciate it as much as I did on the replay. Elijah Rushing's like really up in his grill, full extension, leaping. He just gets it over his fingertips, and Moore just puts it right in the money, about 45, 50 yards downfield. Again, very easily could have been a touchdown catch. Jalil Florence, who we'll talk about later, made a great play on it. Kyler, unfortunately, that's like, it feels like a dozen should be touchdowns that weren't touchdowns because of either he drops it and can't complete the catch, or there's a penalty, etc., for his career. So that's just been something that's been snake bitten or something. But still a really nice throw and for my Dante. And I thought one of many that really stood out as being just like, hey, these guys are putting the ball in places that are tough, and half the time they're being caught, half the time they're not, and that's kind of what you like to see, I think, out of a spring scrimmage in terms of the competition.
Yeah, the Moore throw up the seam to Casper was really impressive. I remember that play live and saying like that might have been a sack for Elijah Rushing, just because of how how close he was getting to Dante Moore and how fast he was barreling down like the middle of the offensive line, and that was a problem all day for Dante. But it was a hell of a throw. It's just a flick of the wrist for him to put anything out there. I mean, he started the game with a layered throw to Kenyon Sadiq, and like over the right side of the field, and just it's like, oh yeah, no, I could. That's a play you could see going live against, I don't know, Michigan State or something like that. You're like, okay, yeah, that looks normal. Yeah, I didn't just like you said, like I didn't come away from this game having any changes in my perception of the quarterback room. It's just kind of, again, selfishly, I wanted to see more of Dante Moore with a good offensive line, because we haven't seen anything this season, and spring season, I should say. And I just wanted, like, all right, well, we kind of saw him last year. We saw him in the fall. What's he look like now? Like, how's he throwing? Like, what's he look like in control of the offense? And for what he could do, I thought it was really good. But again, it just really, really limited attempts. Any honorable mentions here for like like little Achilles Smith Jr. talk? I feel like it's unfortunate for him because he just got blasted by defensive linemen. Like it was ugly, but not his fault, to say the least.
Not his fault at all. It was what you're talking about, and he suffered the same fate as Dante, and probably worse. Just that, like, it seemed like they did match him up with the younger offensive line while keeping the other teams, like Elijah Rushing, just
the older defensive line,
just absolutely ate for like every single play he was on the field, basically. And we'll get to some of that later, because Rushing and Blake Purchase, I came away from this being like, oh my gosh, these guys are dudes. But yeah, I thought Achilles' ability to step up in the pocket and make plays, either throwing the ball, hit Vander Plug a couple times with nice balls down the field. I think one was a third down conversion, the other one might have been earlier down, but also a first down conversion throw. And then the ability to like actually take off and run. Like, he had the most run success of any quarterback. It probably doesn't still show up much in the stats, just because he also was sacked, I think, 2 or 3 times. But no, I was encouraged there, and like you can see the physical tools. Like, there's a reason this guy was ranked where he was. Like, there's still a lot to work on. Like, even one of the completions to Plug, it's more of a good catch than a good throw in terms of just placement. It was pretty wide of the body. Vander had to make an adjustment, but yeah, I think you're really encouraged by the physical tools, and like the pocket awareness is something that you see hopefully in experienced quarterbacks, but not always in the younger ones. And like, to me, just to see him make the right decision, climb the pocket, get out, sometimes be patient and make the right read, make some plays with his legs. Yeah, I think that was super encouraging. I feel for him, because you could tell he really wanted to like lead a touchdown drive or bring the ball down the field, and it just wasn't happening with the offensive line.
He didn't have a chance.
Wasn't happening. So he played, I thought, really well. And then like, I'll also give flowers to Brock Thomas, just because it's a walk-on. Probably won't talk about him much ever again.
Brock.
But good ball down one of my honorable mention top throws was his throw to Kenyon Sadiq, which was a really nice deep ball, like 30, 40 yards down the field. And then he had a nice play on 4th down where he rolled out of the pocket and found Justice Lowe for a diving catch on 4th to convert that one. And Jay Harris scored, I think, the next play. So I thought, I mean, honestly, 5 quarterbacks, 6 play. I don't know if you noticed this. Ryder Hayes got in for 2 snaps, and then they just yanked him.
I think so,
I think you might have
but
been. I think that was when you and the boys were heading down to the field, because I was like,
I
"Is that
see.
Ryder Hayes?" And it
Ryder
was.
Hayes, the hero.
But
The
like
hero.
the 5 who really played, like they all looked pretty good. All had some moments. So like, yeah, I think you have to be like, there's not a quarterback that didn't belong of the ones that played. Is how I
Mhm.
put it.
Pass catchers or running backs?
Let's hit
Or
pass
both?
catchers. I think. Well, we could just do it all. We want to clump them all together. I'm fine doing that. Let's just do
The little
pass
skill
catchers.
position guys?
Let's do pass catchers just because I think it's.
Sure.
I've actually tiered the receivers, and then we can just have a conversation about Kenyon Sadiq, I guess, because he's in a tier of his own basically on this team at this point, I think.
Yeah. You wanna start with Kenyon then?
Yeah, why don't we just do that? What and
Yeah.
you go
Good
ahead and
player.
go first. You
Moving
go ahead
on.
and go first because I've already talked about him a fair amount with Matt, but like what stood out to you? Because this was what we've been looking forward to seeing for basically
Yeah.
2 years now.
Yeah, like I said, good player. That's
Mhm,
about it.
mhm.
No, he's physically is what stood out to me. He's a freak now. Like, I mean, obviously he's always been an incredible athlete, but he now has put on a lot of good weight. He's not never going to be the Terrence Ferguson type of player, as we all know. Like, I think Kenyon's listed at 6'3". He's probably a good 6'3", but Terrence is a good 6'5", 6'6". Like, he's not going to fill that role of a tight end, a guy who can go up and jump ball catch. He's athletic enough to make those plays, but it's not
Mhm.
like you're throwing to the big first baseman over there who's just going to reach up and grab it. Like, he is I thought that the routes that he ran at the spring game were crisp. I thought that his acceleration was great. He
Yeah.
obviously has the athleticism, like when he leapt over Dylan Williams and did the nice little hurdle there. Um, like, he's going to be a dynamic athlete. And, we didn't see what the offense looked like with Evan Stewart in the game because he just didn't play. And we'll get to that, I'm sure, in 5 minutes. But um, you look at his production, and especially with Dante Moore and that connection, you look at that production with a terrible offensive line where Dante Moore didn't have that much time to throw, or whoever was the quarterback in the game at the time. Like, it's easy to see like him shattering all the single season tight end records. And as long as he can, stay healthy and go through a full Big Ten season as the number one tight end, which we haven't seen him do. He was number 2 or 3 last year. Like, this is a big time role change. Like, he's going to play 300 to 400 more snaps than he did last season. So as long as he can make it through that and stay healthy and stay athletic and stay physical with it all, I mean, he could single season records for tight ends are going to be shattered. And I think it's just Terrence Ferguson who set them. So it's like 45 catches. Like, he had, I don't know, I don't have the stat sheet in front of me on how many catches he had today, but he probably had 5 or 6.
He had
If
7.
you have that, he had 7.
Yep.
So I think he's just going to be a matchup nightmare. I'd like to see them get away from throwing like little screens to him because while he's a great athlete, he's not that great of an athlete. But over the middle of the field, down the sideline, matchup nightmare against nickelbacks. I think he's a freak. I think he's going to be quite the player this year, and it would not shock me at all if this is his last season at Oregon. And I mean that, complimentary. Like, he's going to be that good where a team in the NFL is going to say, "Yeah, we need him. We need him on our offense, please. Thank you." And wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, no, not at all. I'm in the same boat. During the Big Ten broadcast, when Yogi Roth and Guy Haberman were talking about how Will Stein wanted to get 80 touches out of him this season, I was like, just find a way to make it happen. Like this offense to be
80 might be
successful.
low.
Honestly, it might be just like especially if you're going to incorporate him in the screen game and out of the backfield like they have in the past. And like I'll be curious to see how much of that we see. There wasn't really a lot of that on Saturday. He lined up out
Mhm.
wide actually a lot, and frankly,
That's
I'd
good.
sign me up for that. Utilize him that way if you think you got the depth at tight end, or even if you don't want to really incorporate a true inline guy, like that's fine if you've got a player like him out there. Um, but yeah, like everything you said, totally agree. You saw it all. Like you saw the tough catches he made in traffic. Obviously we know he can hurdle guys. He also like plastered. I think that was it. I think it was Aaron Flowers who just got blown up at one point by
Yeah.
him after he made a catch to
Poor
move the
guy.
ball close to
Yeah.
the goal line. Yeah, Aaron had a great day, by the way. But like that's tough luck. You on the other side of a 6'3", 250-pound guy who probably is going to run sub 4.5, who just puts you on your ass. Like that's a tough spot, but that's the type of player that Kenyon is. And like, yeah, I think tight end records are going to fall this year, and I don't think he's going to be around long enough to break the career records. Because I agree with you, Jared. I think this is the end probably for him in 25, and so enjoy it. And like clearly, one of the things that stood out to me was like Dante Moore and he really have a connection, and assuming that's who the starting quarterback is, and again, that's where we're still probably all feeling right now. Like you have to really be encouraged by there's a baseline of like Dante and Kenyon really seem to have something working there, and there's some kind of slow, growing pains to start the year, which wouldn't be a surprise with the younger quarterback and a bunch of receivers he hasn't played with in games. Maybe that connection would be, even enhanced early on.
Mhm.
So yeah, came away really impressed with him. I'll say the rest of the tight ends wasn't a ton of production. Not a lot of them played just because like Roger Salepaga dressed didn't play. I was actually encouraged that he was even in uniform. Like Jared, we turned to each other and we're like, this guy just like blew his knee out in November, we think, or some sort of significant knee injury. And now he's at least in uniform. That was encouraging, but yeah, didn't see him play. Jamari had a chance to make a catch on a fade. Ball was broken up by Trey McNutt. Vanderploeg made a couple of nice catches over the middle, which wasn't a ton else. And then one thing I was going to note on tight end that I brought up to you, Jared, before we jumped on was I don't know if it was numbers. I don't know if it's something they're going to do later on in the season in goal line, but Mateo Uiagalelei was actually out there on a couple of goal line touchdowns, both of Jay Harris's. Certainly the second one, as a inline blocker. He basically drove Kingston Lopa through the back of the end zone on the second one. That might be like something that they don't do during the fall, or maybe it will. But either way, it was just like kind of a little quick note for those who, and I didn't catch it live. I only caught it on the replay because I was watching like, who's that tight end just absolutely mauling Lopa? And I was like, oh, that's Mateo. That's notable.
That's
So
Mateo. That's a
I
big
don't know
boy.
if that's a depth concern. I don't know if that's just they didn't have the numbers in this game because some guys didn't play. I don't know what it is necessarily. I don't know if it's just like, hey, Mateo would be a hell of a blocker. He's really big and athletic and strong, and he's going to drive defensive backs and linebackers through the back of the end zone. But either way, kind of just a small little notable nugget for people who maybe didn't pick up on that. Might be something we see come fall again. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure with Mateo. I mean, I wouldn't really mess with what he's doing. I think he's just too valuable to the defense. But I mean, it makes sense. He's a big boy. He's 6'5", 285 pounds, and quite strong as a defensive end. So
yeah,
it would make sense. But something I think depth is certainly something to keep an eye on there. Running backs.
No, I wanted to tier the receivers first. Can we do that?
You wanted to tier the receivers first. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Okay. And I'll try to be quickish on this because there were a lot of receivers, and we could spend. I've already
Just a
noticed
few.
and going like I was probably optimistic to think we'd go under an hour if we're going to go every position group because we've only gone through like 1.5 and we're 20 minutes in. So time is of the essence. Sorry, folks. But like, okay, I've got my 2 spring game standouts: Dylan Gresham, DeCorian Moore.
Mm-hmm.
DeCorian really for just one play, but it was probably worth the price of admission, even though the price of admission was free.
It's free. It's worth it.
But
Yeah.
you know my point. Like you guys came to see this guy play.
Yeah.
He made a great play early. It was exciting. I think it was really exciting that Austin trusted him. That he basically just locked in and threw a couple passes to him like his first 2 attempts. And DeCorian came down with the second. And then Dylan Gresham, Jared, and I'll send it to you because I'm sure you have some thoughts on him. This is a guy who, like, it was easy to kind of overlook. There's a ton of talent in this room. Like, basically, all these guys are former 4- and 5-star recruits. Gresham didn't play at all last year. Not only was he out of the rotation, I just never saw the field in any capacity. And then he goes out there and like I think like pound for pound was the best receiver on the field for 4 quarters. Now, opportunity comes into play there. You kind of addressed some of the stuff on the other side with the offensive line that maybe got in the way from some of the explosive pass game working. But the times Gresham was targeted, good things happened. The first catch he had was a 3rd down conversion on the white team's first or second drive. Second one was the nice diving catch I mentioned earlier from Luke Moga to extend that drive. The last catch he had was the long touchdown to put, the go-ahead score, 56 yards, a simple slant, gets inside leverage on Dorian Brew, catches it. Peyton Woodyard, for some reason, like kind of takes a step
I
the
don't
wrong
know. Yeah, that was a
direction.
weird one.
Kind of
Yeah.
confused on what happened there, and then he's just off to the races. So like 3 catches, all big plays. And the 4th target I can remember, he might have had a couple others, but one of the other targets, he actually caught the ball falling out of bounds right before his slant for a touchdown on a play where he was interfered with by Brew. So like, I don't know, I came away being like, guy looks physically bigger than I had expected. Like he's put on some weight, showed the speed, showed the ability to make the tough contested catches. I don't know like where to put him on a two deep, which is something I'm going to start working on this week. But I know he should probably be in conversation for that. And this was not a guy that I felt that way coming in. So he's definitely like the big winner in stock value probably. But also for me, like, I don't know, Jared, like this look somewhat legit. It's a one spring game. It's one data point. I don't want to overreact, but like I wouldn't be surprised if he's in the rotation come fall.
No, and there hasn't been anybody who's stepped up in that wide receiver room in quite some time, if I'm being honest with you. You've had guys transfer in that you expect to do well,
That's
like
a
a
good
Tez
point.
Johnson
That's a good point. Yep.
or an Evan Stewart. You've had guys that, Troy Franklin showcased his potential in 2022, the Dan Lanning's first year. Chase Cota was good in that year as well, but there hasn't been a lot of internal development. You're still waiting on the Kyler Caspers. You're still waiting on the Jurion Dickies. This is a different group. This is a different wide receiver unit. And a Dylan Gresham, Justice Lowe type season would be great. Justice Lowe is probably the only guy who has really stepped up and formulated a role here in this offense. And that's a guy who was really, really underlooked coming out of high school.
Totally.
And
Yep.
was a pretty important player in Oregon's 13-1 season last year, especially to the injuries to the wide receiver room. But yeah, I thought Gresham looked really nice. Definitely bigger, listed at 6'3", 190, or 6 feet 190 last season. Wouldn't surprise me if he's 6 feet 205 potentially.
Yeah.
His slant touchdown, like Peyton Woodyard made a bad play and maybe would have stopped that from happening, like from being a touchdown. But still, he got off the line really well. He was going against Dorian Brew, who is a true freshman. Like, he made the cut and got a lot of separation there and took advantage of the true freshman trying to guard him and took off. I didn't think he had that straight line speed, but was a track runner in high school. Unsurprisingly, that's what Oregon loves to have in their cornerback and wide receiver room. Like, I think it'll be important if he can step up and be something because, Oregon needs him. They need Jeremiah McClellan. They need somebody on the redshirt freshman sophomore list to be, reliable. Somebody that the quarterback can throw to and not fear anything. Because specifically last year, it was like when Tez went out, everybody knew it.
Yeah.
And same thing with Ferguson too. Like the safety valves, like you need to have some confidence there in your wide receiver group. And if Gresham can do that, then that's going to be incredibly important for this team. But I was pleasantly surprised I did not have him on my bingo card of guys to stand out in the spring game. So it was nice to see for sure.
On the speed thing, Jared, I feel like it's like a prerequisite they've run sub 11 in the 100
Yeah.
to be a receiver or corner on this team. I know
Dylan didn't. I hate to say it.
I think he's just a little over, I think, if I remember.
Yeah,
But
11.35.
yeah,
I was just looking it up.
That's not blazing fast by any means. I mean, it's not slow, but it's not the 10.49 that Luke Moga ran. I had to relook that up after I heard Yogi talk about how he was 10.4 in the 100 in high school. And I was like, was it that fast? And he was like sub 11. Yeah, 10.49. Next,
good.
Yeah, very good. I want next tier promising performers, and these are three guys whose names actually just all came up: Kyler Casper, Jeremiah McClellan, and I included Jurion Dickey just because he did make a play, and to me that was promising. Do I think he's somebody who's going to matter this year? I still really don't know what to do with him, but I'll be honest, I was encouraged. Like that was the best play I've seen him make in an Oregon uniform, Jared. I think by quite a lot.
Oh yeah, I mean he's two other. We looked it up in the press box. He's had 2 catches over the first 2 years of his career.
Yeah, and so a 35-yard catch to set up a touchdown. Good to see it. I just don't know what to do with him at this point. He's kind of this enigmatic figure where it's like, he's big, physical, and athletic, but has he done anything in his Oregon career? No. Is he going to do anything this year? I don't know. But hey, I'm encouraged he went out there and made those plays. Casper, 4 catches, 42 yards, had a couple pretty high leverage grabs. One to maybe kind of bring the black team back there on that final drive that unfortunately ended with the interception. McClellan was really reliable. None of the plays were like difficult, but I think I would say of the receivers, he probably ran to green grass the best. Like he just had, I think all 3 of his catches were like kind of intermediate underneath routes that he was just wide open. So don't know what the explanation is it could be, defensive mistakes, could be he's just a really good route runner. Either way, he was just open and caught the balls. So was encouraged with that. So that's my second tier. Any response to that, or should I move on down to the third?
I just really like Jeremiah McClellan. I think he could be good. But
Yeah,
go
yeah.
for the third tier.
And then I just titled this underwhelming showings, and I started with Malik Benson. I kind of touched on it earlier. Fans who watch the game know, like, this guy's issue at other schools was lack of production. Kind of lacked some production in this game. He had 1 catch for 9 yards, and it wasn't because of lack of targets. He was targeted 4 times. 2 of them were what could have been touchdown passes. One was a long pass I mentioned earlier. The other one was the one broken up by Naeem. That one I don't put much blame on him, but like, it's a guy who I think I wrote him. He was my receiver pick for like who had the most at stake coming into this one, because
Yeah.
he was brought in. This is his 1 year. Like, what can he do? And I think he's probably disappointed himself. I'm sure other people on the program wish he would have been able to make a couple more plays because they were available to him. And then just 3 guys that just didn't end up doing very much that I don't necessarily blame them for, but Cooper Perry, Justice Lowe, Gary Bryant Jr. These guys are receivers. Their job, their production is relying on quarterbacks getting them the ball, and those guys just
Mm-hmm.
didn't get the ball. So Perry dropped kind of a nice pass from Luke Moga down the field that maybe could have been like a 20-yard,
Oh, yeah.
25-yard catch, but it was also tight coverage, and kind of, I don't really necessarily put it on him. Justice had that nice diving catch I mentioned earlier, but just not a lot from those 3 guys. But I'm not really worried. Malik, maybe I'm overreacting because it's one spring game, but like, he had plays available to him and he didn't make them. The other guys just didn't have a whole lot of opportunity.
I still think Malik is a player Oregon brought on in like a break glass in case of emergency thing,
Yeah.
where he has like the physical upside and was a pretty highly rated JUCO recruit coming out of junior college. Fun fact.
The number 1 rated.
The number 1 rated. I think if you're Oregon, like, you would prefer him to have, I don't know what type of role. Maybe the Kyler Casper role from last year, where it's like when he was healthy, where he would play, but it wasn't that often. Like, I think you would prefer to see guys step up, like Dylan Gresham, like Jeremiah McClellan. Like, he's a really good depth piece, and I almost feel like that's kind of how Jaden Kennedy is on the defensive side of the ball, where you're like, hey, in case of an injury or something, like, we have somebody who's played at the Power 5 level multiple years, knows how to play football, like someone that you can rely on in an unfortunate circumstance like that. But I don't know if he's going to be, a starter or anything like that. But
I would be floored after what we saw the other day, but that's one data point I know. It's just that was tough.
And that's the other thing. Like, Dan and everybody watches this
Yeah.
on an everyday basis, so I'm gonna default to them with especially with this. Now, during the season, we'll have our own opinions on a lot of things because we'll see more just on game weeks. But yeah, I think the receiver room just, again, no Evan Stewart. Like, they just need somebody to step up, and they got to replace Tez Johnson, who was almost 900 yards last season and 86 catches. Just did the draft article. Like, there's a lot of production to replace. Same with Terrence Ferguson. Like, they just need more opportunities, and maybe they go more run heavy, but we'll kind of find out during the year, I guess.
Should we talk running back then, if we're talking run heavy?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I'm trying to think who stood out the most. I think like Mekhi Hughes stood out the most. I think he didn't get as many carries as other guys did, but he didn't start like the first couple of drives, and I think that was just because it's a spring game and they went full tackle. They don't want to have him be hurt because he's going to be their bell cow this year. But it was very clear. I wasn't paying 100% attention, and I looked down on the field, and they were running like an inside zone down to the left, and someone found the cutback lane and jumped back and ran an extra 12 yards. I'm like, wow, that guy was much different than the other running backs. And I looked down, it's number 20, it's Mekhi Hughes. I'm like, yeah, that checks out. He's just on a different level than everybody else. But I thought Noah Whittington looked good. I thought DeJuan Riggs looked good. Jay Harris looked pretty good too. He's just a big bully. Obviously, he had the fumble that led up the Blake Purchase touchdown recovery. But I think it's a really formidable running back room. Like, I think that there's a lot of talent and there's a lot of diversity in terms of skill sets as well, which I think hasn't necessarily been something Oregon has had in the past. They've had like Bucky and Jordan James and Noah Whittington, who all kind of like had similar skill sets, I would say. Bucky was obviously like the better runner, but I think they got some options here. Maybe some third down games, maybe some like screen pass type of situations with some of the freshmen. But I think it's a really formidable running back group. Like I think there's a lot of talent there.
Yeah, I was just gonna say you mentioned four guys whose games you liked. I also thought Jalen Lamar like had a nice little punch there on the first touchdown. Had,
Hmm.
caught the ball cleanly. Had a couple other good runs. Deer Hill, like I know it's not going to probably matter much immediately. I wouldn't imagine just because there are all these other names, but like when he's running, and it's one of those things where as you're waiting for the blocks to develop, you're not hitting full speed, but his like patiently waiting looks so different than the rest of the other guys, if that makes sense. Just the way he
Yeah.
then shifts down or shifts up from kind of low gear and accelerates, like it's exciting, and he needs to add probably a little weight just compared to the other guys because physically you can tell he's quite a bit leaner, but there's something special in there. So I wanted to make sure we hit that. Agreed with everything else you ran through. I thought it was great for Jay Harris after he fumbled the ball to come out there and punish a couple people on the first touchdown run. Like he ran through
Yeah.
Kilo Hana, he ran through Dylan Williams. The Dylan Williams one was brutal, probably up there with Sadiq's plowing of Flowers in
Yeah.
terms of the best initiation
Yeah.
of contact from a back or a ball carrier. Um, and then yeah, like all the other guys you said, like I'm just gonna call him Dink. I think at this point, he says his name's
Sure.
pronounced Dejan. By the way, just FYI, that was new
John
to me.
Riggs.
Dejan
Okay.
Riggs, but he goes by Dink primarily. Sometimes he forgets what his given name is, so that there's a little
Okay.
nugget. Um, I don't. I mean, I don't. I mean, Rashad Samples made it sound like this was going to be tough on him to figure out the hierarchy for reps. I come away feeling that completely the same. Like I do
Yeah.
agree, Hughes and a couple, especially the first like two or three runs he had, which all went for seemingly first downs. Just the you're right. It was the patience and then the acceleration and then the physicality. Like I wrote in the
Yep.
review, like it always felt like he was the one initiating contact and then falling forward, which is what you want out of a running back, especially given the importance of getting an extra yard or two at the end of a play. So I agree, he's on probably his own tier, but like you could tell me everybody probably but De'Aaron Hill is on the next tier in terms of like Jaden Lamar, Dink, Noah, and Jay. Like if you told me those guys were all going to play a secondary role behind Makai this year, I'd be like, sign me up. Sign me up. That sounds good. Those guys
Hmm.
all have different skill sets. There are things that they did that were impressive. Um, it was you kind of made a note of it. It was interesting that it was Lamar, Riggs, Hughes as the order of operation on the field. I'm not really buying anything into it because we saw with our own eyes how good Makai was, but like
Yeah.
staff sending a message, staff just trying to like mix and match. I don't know, but that was something that should be at least acknowledged. Like, yeah, Hughes for whatever reason was the third running back to see the field for the white team, even though I think we both and probably everybody who watched agreed we're like that's the guy. That's one of the most. Yeah, that's clearly the most talented ball carrier. So. I think you should be excited now. Now, what is this running game going to look like? Is it going to be improvement statistically from this past year? Uh, I would say probably, but
Yeah.
while whether
I'm not
that's
exactly sure, but yeah.
the case or not comes down to this next group, and that's the offensive line, which um, there's a lot of stuff to talk about here.
Yeah. Let's I kind of want to do like trench warfare and talk D line, O
Yeah,
line at the same time. But
overlapping.
before we
Let's
do
do
that, let's take a quick little break, and then we're gonna come back and kind of dissect what we saw with the Battle of the Trenches here. So we'll be right back. And we're back on the Autzen Audibles podcast again. I'm your host, Jared Mack. With me is Erik Skopil. We're diving into some more in-depth kind of reactions from Oregon's spring game that happened this past weekend on April 26th. We let off, or we finished the first half of the podcast going about running backs, and now we're going to dive into offensive and defensive line. I felt it's kind of important to look at both of those at the same time and try to gauge some interest there and try to talk out what we saw on the field. Like we were talking about earlier, the Combat Ducks or the black team didn't have the best of offensive lines, but I was really encouraged by the Fighting Ducks, the white team, and their offensive line play.
yep.
From left to right, I'm pretty sure it was Isaiah World, Vika Rogers, Poncho, uh, Matthew Bedford, and then Janoris Wilson on the right tackle side. That was the primary unit. Obviously, they were switching guys in and out, but I was really encouraged by that side because they went against some starters, projected starters for me on the defensive line, and Bear Alexander and Mateo Uyunglele. I'm trying to think of it was Terrence Green was also there, and I'm trying to
Mhm.
remember who the other outside linebacker was, but my memory has slipped me here.
Ashton
Um,
Porter played quite a bit there,
Ashton Porter, yeah, he did play quite a bit. Who I liked, but we'll
and
get to
played
in a
well.
second.
Played well.
Yeah, but Autzen Audibles and whoever was behind center there for the white team had a lot of open looks. I thought Matthew Bedford was frankly really really good.
He was my O
Um,
line. He was my O line MVP.
yeah, I thought he did a very good job handling Bear Alexander. I didn't know what he would look like coming off of his injury last season, and it's been a while. I mean, he got hurt early in fall camp, came back, got hurt during the bye week, or re-aggravated the injury during the bye week. So it's been a minute, but he looked really good. I thought he did an excellent job handling Bear Alexander, and I know a lot of people said, "Oh, Bear didn't do anything." Like technically, yes, don't get me wrong, but I thought Bedford was awesome, and I think I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do at guard now because that's kind of maybe changed a little bit of my perspective of like who are my starting guards going into next season, whether it be Dave Iuli or Matthew Bedford on the right side, because I think it'll be Pregnon on the left. But he was really good. I think that's kind of where I wanted to start was just highlighting the offensive lineman. I thought that did well, and Bedford was easily my number one, followed by Isaiah World. But we'll get to him in a second.
Yeah, no, Isaiah. Just actually, why don't we just hit this right now?
Sure.
You're right that there were 11 sacks recorded unofficially, but officially by the school. 7 were allowed by the black offensive line, 4 by the white offensive line. None of those sacks, from how I charted it, came from the right side of the offensive line. All came left. Now it wasn't all Isaiah World's fault. He did the play of the day, which I missed, I think, live. I didn't pick up on it. Was Mateo's spin move he
Yeah,
went
that was
outside
mean.
in.
Yeah.
Just a guy like Isaiah World, who again, top tier athlete, even he was a step slow on that, and Mateo ends up getting the sack there. But you're right that I just thought World is like there's that moment where you're kind of like, poof, that was a great play by Mateo. But gosh, he really held his own going against the returning Big Ten sack leader. And
Mm-hmm.
like this is what we expect from this guy when you bring him in. This is why he was rated the way he was. Like, is he going to win every single rep? Not when he's going against a guy who might also be a first, second, or third round draft pick, or where I don't know wherever these guys get picked. But that's like in the conversation. Like if you were to tell me Isaiah and Mateo both go first round next year, I'm not like, oh wow, that's crazy. That seems reasonable to suggest that could happen. So there's of course, going to be some back and forth, but Isaiah absolutely held the zone. Was almost a little bit better on run plays for me at times. I thought they ran to his side really effectively. But yeah, just like that white offensive line, like I said, there was that was a sack, the spin move. There was a sack where there were 2 sacks that were miscommunications, and this was where it was a little confusing because it was Poncho's side, but there was the one where Nix was a free runner once, and
Nick's
then
friend, yeah.
Platt was a free runner off the other side another time. And so, like, of the sacks, like one was a guy on defense making a great play. The other 2 were defensive miscommunications. And then the fourth, I'd have to go look through my notes closer to, I don't remember what it was, but that's just like 3/4 of those are like, okay, that's something that happens. It's disappointing, but it's not like players getting abused. The other side, that was really not the case. It was completely the other, the downside of that was, yeah, there were some guys on the other side who really struggled on the black offensive line. Uh, Alex Harkey was actually quite good for the most part. Did get beat a couple times by speed rushes, but it was actually the funniest sequence, Jared, was Blake Purchase and Matt Johnson on one side of the ball teaming up and just obliterating the left side of the offensive line, which was, I had it down as Fox Crater and
Yeah.
Austin Mims, sorry,
Mims.
was the
LeBron
left,
James's like
like
nephew or something. Yeah.
godson or something. I don't know. He was in
Yeah.
the Netflix documentary, and he's like, "Go Ducks!" Yeah, so that's my reference
Yeah.
point for him. And my next reference point was Matthew Johnson just cooking him for a play to get a sack. And then I don't know if this was by design or what, but Tosh then moved those guys to the other side like 2 plays later and was like, "All right, try again." And then they just did the exact same thing to Douglas Utu and Dimitri Manning, where they just completely cooked that side. And so some of these sacks were kind of like good on bad, where like Purchase and Matthew Johnson, like now I didn't know Matthew Johnson was this kind of a player, but he was involved in a lot of the sacks, and
Yeah.
he looks like a dude. Um, But the speed rush in particular was a real problem on that side, where I know they wanted the Mateo Isaiah World combo. I would have loved to have seen how Isaiah and Janoris, with their little bit maybe quicker feet than Alex Harkey, Fox Crater, and some of the other combos, would have stood up,
Mhm.
because Purchase and Elijah rushing, I had them at 4 sacks combined, and 8 total pressures. Like, they were just all over the place. And like, you have
Mhm.
to be really excited because you already have Mateo, you already have Tatum. These are known commodities. These are star all conference, all American caliber players in Mateo's case. These young guys are coming and they look the part. And again, I don't want to overhype it because again, they're going against younger offensive linemen at times, but Purchase also just absolutely blazed past Alex Harkey once. And there was a couple of times where, their speed is like, you almost don't think the offensive lineman's out of his stance before he's already getting to the quarterback. So that's going to be something to follow. And, I wrote in my story here, it's a weird deal with the spring game, the split lines we talked about. There's also like the quarterback gets touched and sacked. And I think a lot of people thought like, oh, the majority of the sacks probably wouldn't have been sacks in a real game. I, I pushed back slightly. I think
I think those were real sacks.
8 of the 11 were very legitimate, and then there were 3 that I wrote down. I was like, one of which was Dante Moore getting hit throwing the pass, right, which is not going to be a sack. He still got the ball out. That counted as a sack. And then a couple others where it was like, I think actually the quarterback would have had a step to kind of evade and maybe not get sacked. But a lot of these were like a couple of dudes bearing down right on top of them. So yeah, good on some of these young guys. Matt Johnson to me really stood out from an interior rush perspective, and then those 2 pass rushers on the outside. Like, gosh, Blake and Elijah. I don't know how much that translates come fall, but that speed looks legit, and that
Uh-huh.
explosiveness looks legit. And there were a lot of tackles that just couldn't stand up to it at all.
Yeah, the Matt Johnson thing was really interesting because I thought he would come in as an edge rusher, and
Mhm.
he's
Where,
not.
that's where he played in high school.
Yep, he is an interior defensive lineman, at least when Blake Purchase and Tatum Tuioti are on the field. And I thought that was really interesting because high school profiles listed at 6'5", 265. He looks a lot bigger than that. And obviously
Mhm.
he's enrolled early and has had time to add weight. I'll be interested to see what his weight was or will be like at fall camp because
I think
he looked physically the part too. That was the other thing.
I think
Like
Tony
it
said he
wasn't like,
was 22. I said 295, something like that, or Tosh.
okay,
Somebody threw a weight out. Sorry.
which means that he's 30 pounds heavier than he was in high school already. Because like he didn't, like when Mateo would line up interior last year, you're like, all right, he needs to put on like some pounds, even though he's already a massive human being. You're like, yeah, he looks a little skinnier down there, but it's part of the package that they were running. Matt Johnson did not. Like he looked like an interior defensive lineman. And granted, he does look smaller because when you're pairing him next to Amari Washington, like, yeah, like who doesn't look small in that situation? Or Jericho Johnson or whoever it is down there. Like those are some ginormous fellas. And Jericho had himself a very good day too, which was really encouraging to see his development. Um, Purchase, I can't tell if Purchase added or dropped weight.
Yeah,
Like
agree.
I can't tell if he looks physically bigger because he's added weight or he looks physically bigger because he's added like cut down and added muscle weight type of deal.
Leaned out, right?
Yeah. And but he was awesome. And it clearly shows that Oregon took a real chance on redshirting him last year. Like that's the guy who played almost 200 snaps his freshman year. And while his production wasn't there, like he was a real intricate part of their defensive line.
Mhm.
And they said, look, you played 12 or 14 games your freshman year. We're going to redshirt you. And that's a big chance that Oregon takes where he's A, okay with that, and B, okay with that to the point that he doesn't want to transfer out. And so far, again, this is only, one data point, but looks like he's going to be another really important part of this defense in the upcoming season. Um, and then Elijah Rushing was awesome, was really good. He looks physically much more developed. His pass rush moves were pretty nice. On his one sack, he just went right around Alex Harkey. Like I think that's going to be the thing. Like I don't know where Harkey plays this year, but he just went right around him, and it was kind of impressive to watch that his foot speed at 6'7", whatever he is that good to go right around. He almost had another sack on Dante Moore with the throw over the middle to Kyler Casper. Um, I think that he's going to be like a really important player on their third down and long packages. Like I would kind of how Oregon would throw Birch on the inside and Mateo on the outside. Like I think they'll do that, but Mateo on the inside and Elijah Rushing as a stand-up edge rusher this upcoming season. Um, I think that he's going to be an absolute freak this year. I'm trying to think if there's other defensive line guys who Porter I thought played really well.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
we saw some Nasir Wyatt, which was fun. Really small outside linebacker, but has the speed and quickness to get around. Um, had a good stunt on Isaiah World to at least induce a pressure, if not get a sack, which I thought was really interesting to see. He kind of reminds me of how Oregon used Brandon Buckner in 2021.
Mm.
Um, just like a
Hmm.
smaller guy, but speed, can just get around bigger humans. I'm not sure how much he'll play this year. He'll probably redshirt, but
Okay.
thought that was encouraging. That was the first time you get to see him live. I think Tosh had mentioned him before as somebody who's been playing well during the spring. Um, but and the other thing was the big boys up front. Like obviously Oregon is losing a lot of talent with Jamar Caldwell and Derek Harmon both getting drafted this past weekend. They are certainly bringing back some size because Amari Washington, Terrence Green, Bear Alexander, Jericho Johnson, Tioni Gray, and I guess Matthew Johnson now. Like
Aiden
those are
Breland,
some
who didn't play in the game, but he's big boy.
right. Yeah, those are some really ginormous people, specifically Jericho Johnson. Even though he's clearly slimmed down, which he needed to, like he's probably still like 6'5", 340 and real space eater. And if he can grow and develop and you're comfortable bringing him off the pine and putting him in on a rundown opposite of Amari Washington, like those are some really big people they're going to be asking to to go against if you're rushing the ball. Like that's going to be a real handful for offensive linemen. So I was encouraged by the defensive line. That was one of the big things because they just lost
Hmm.
so much production from last season, and they need guys to step up. But I think the talent's there. You just got to see it against other people, and that's why it was so encouraging that the Fighting Ducks, the white team offensive line was so good because they were going against good competition on the interior, and they really did well. So we'll see how that translates over the regular season. But I was impressed by the defensive line overall.
Yeah, absolutely. Amari was. I wrote in my notes. We know he had a quick first step, but the rest of the steps look pretty darn quick as well. Like for a guy who's
Good lord.
320 pounds, like he once
Sorry,
he gets
everybody.
ahead of steam, you're good. Once he gets ahead of steam, it's like this guy can move, and he was very disruptive, and honestly, probably like they kind of
Yep.
changed the rules of the scrimmage and just like called the timeout, even though they hadn't been calling them to keep the scrimmage going, or else it would have ended with the sack by Washington, which wasn't really a sack because Moore did throw the football down the field, and it. But anyway, I
Yep.
digress. He looks the part. Bear had one decent. He had one play that popped to me where he mauled Bedford inside and led to a throwaway, but he was well taken care of on the kind of backing up what you said earlier about Bedford's day. And yeah, just these big guys, man. They're big, athletic. Like Tion, like he chased down Brock Thomas at one point on a scramble. Brock Thomas is a fast quarterback. I watched him at Sheldon. Like I don't know what he runs, but he's not like a 4'8", 100-meter guy. Like 440. Well, he's definitely not a 4'8", 100-meter. He's probably not a 4'8", 40-meter guy either. And Tion was able to kind of chase him down. Terrence Green looked the part, and then like you said, Jericho to me was one of the winners of just like body changed a little bit, super impactful on run plays, and even showed a little bit of pop on a couple of the pass rushes as well. So they've got a lot of names there. Again, like the other positions we mentioned, and this is just across the team. The depth is really impressive on this team. There's a lot of really good players, and there's going to be very good players that are probably out of the rotation that would be starting caliber players at lesser Big Ten schools. Like there's probably like I think there's like 15 guys that would start at Purdue who like probably aren't going to play very much at all at Oregon this year. Like that's kind of my point. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, 100%. Um, it's also Purdue, but yeah, no, there's a ton of talent on this defensive line, and there's the defense in general. Um, I'm sorry if my Wi-Fi is kind of pooping out right now, but
It's good now. It was
Hope
you were frozen for a second.
Yeah, that was good. We love that. But no, I agree. Like the defensive line, like it's clear. We've seen at the time Oregon loading up on defensive linemen in their transfer portal classes, and then specifically their high school recruiting classes, where you're bringing in 4 or 5 4-star defensive linemen every once in a while, 5-star like Breeden or Breland and rushing. It's showing now. To be clear, like this is why they didn't go out. They added Bear in the portal, obviously, but the last couple of seasons they've been adding big time names in the transfer portal at the defensive line position because they didn't like their depth there. They added Bear, and that was it. And that was because he can be a really impressive player when he's on, and they feel comfortable with their depth, and so do I, because it showed on Saturday, and I think there's a lot of talented players on that line.
Yeah, just the last thing I'll say, and then we can move to linebacker. But it's building off what you said. How about the fact that we came out of the spring game being like, "Hey, the defensive line looked really good," and kind of whooped the offensive lines for parts of the scrimmage, at least on pass downs in particular. And yet we also
Mhm.
say Bear Alexander, this big time transfer they brought in, was pretty much a nothing burger, and yet we're still optimistic about this group. That really speaks to what we saw from some of the younger guys, I think.
Yeah. All right, linebacker to start. Devin Jackson did not play. Um, Lined up in street clothes. Not exactly sure what his injury is. He wasn't in a boot like Aiden Breland, didn't have a sling on his arm like Bo Cress Allen, where you're like, hey, that's probably the problem going on here with this said player. We will maybe eventually find out how long he's out for, but there's no more football media, no more nothing until August. So that'll be fun. But Bryce Betcher played, Kamar Mathuti, Jerry Mixon, Dylan Williams, all Gavin Nix, all the guys I'm forgetting some of them
Braden
clearly.
Platt, and I thought Braden
Braden
had a
Platt.
great day.
I did too. I thought he and Jerry Mixon were awesome. Mixon, I have the stats here, finished with 7 tackles and 2.5 tackles for loss and 1 sack. If Devin Jackson is hurt for a prolonged period of time, it's probably your starting Mike linebacker opposite of Bryce Betcher. And from what you saw on Saturday, you feel a little more comfortable with that now, having actual eyes to game there and being able to see how he plays in the open field and make tackles and rush the passer. Um, but I agree, like Braden Platt was electric. I thought he was
Mhm.
really surprising because the kick on him coming out of high school, when he first committed to Oregon, I think he was like a top 50 prospect in the country. And then by the time he signed with Oregon a couple months later, I think he dropped down to like in the almost 200s, if I remember correctly. I'll probably have to look this up while we're talking here. But like the kick on him was that he wasn't athletic enough and really, dominated Washington high school level competition, which isn't the best in the world. But he looked really quick to the ball. He looked quick sideline to sideline. He was making plays in the open field. He was tackling well. I'll try to pull up his stats real quick if I can find them. But here, 5 tackles, one sack, 2 tackles for loss. Like he looked the part, and this linebacker room's going to need to replace a lot with Jeff and Justin Jacobs leaving. They had 4 players last year with 200 or more snaps. Boston Betcher took the most, but Devin Jackson had over 400 snaps, and they're going to need to replace the 500-600 that Jeffrey Bossa is leaving, which probably goes to Devin Jackson when he's healthy. But they also need to replace the extra 300 to 400 with Justin Jacobs and Devin Jackson last year as a backup.
Yeah.
So they need to find people there, and they've been very adamant that they are not going into the portal. Brian Michalowski said it. Dan Lanning said it after the game on Saturday. Like, they're not going to go in the portal, and if they do, then they've just been lying and to the public this whole time, which wouldn't be the first time. But I don't think that they're going to go into the portal. I liked what I saw from their linebacker core. I hate to admit it, with Jerry Mixon and Braden Platt, and I like what I saw from Kamar Mathuti. Like, he certainly physically looks the part. And then Bryce, like, he didn't play too much, but we've seen what he can do on the
We
football
know
field all of last season.
we know
You're
Bryce.
not you're not worried about Bryce Betcher there at the Mack linebacker spot. But again, I don't know how long Devin Jackson is going to be out. I don't know if anybody really does or what the problem is other than inside the team, but I do like what they got back there. And it'll be kind of interesting to see who becomes like the top dog in terms of who takes the Devin Jackson role last year as the number one linebacker. And it's probably going to be Jerry Mixon at this point. Third year in the program, looks the part, physically runs well, can go sideline to sideline. Like that's what you need in a linebacker nowadays.
Yeah, I know most people probably figured this out, but Devin Jackson, I do have the same barber, so I might have seen him a couple days before the spring game at the barber. Might have heard he was going to be okay, but who knows? We'll see.
Who knows? We'll see.
Yeah, just on the front there, like I think I wasn't sure exactly where I would land with this group because there is a total lack aside from the two guys you mentioned a moment ago who really played much at all. And I really came out being like Jerry and Braden. Maybe this is just a prisoner of the moment. They were on the same defense, seemingly like I wrote my thing. It felt like Legolas and Gimli at one point in I think the second Lord of the Rings movie,
Nice.
trading off like I'm going to get a hit. I'm going to get a hit. Right. It was like there was a couple sequences where it was like Platt tackle for loss, Mixon tackle for loss, Platt tackle, Mixon tackle. There's just kind of this back and forth out there. And like they looked really comfortable playing together, and maybe these guys will be kind of the second team linebackers ultimately, and that'll be a nice fit in terms of skill sets. Because I do think like sideline to sideline, both guys are fast enough, getting up field. I thought both guys were really impactful on some of the run plays, and of course with some instances where they kind of wash themselves out as you expect with younger backers going against the type of talent that's on the other side. But I think you're really encouraged by those guys. Kamar and Dylan, I don't think I was quite as impressed with. Kamar continues to be like physically, he just looks the part almost more than anybody on this team, even Bryce and even Devin, just because he's big, he's bulking, he moves so quickly. There's just a couple of things missing there, and that's a developmental thing where kind of like Devin Jackson. I'll liken it to Devin Jackson, even though I think they're quite different players in terms of like their strengths and weaknesses. But like I could see this being one where you look at Kamar and go, he has all the physical tools, but maybe it's going to take him a couple of years, like it did for Devin, for it to click. But once it does, it's really impressive. It's kind of where I'm at there. Dylan's like slightly undersized, strangely still, not in a terrible way. He made some really nice plays in coverage, but he also, like I said earlier, he got run through a couple times on different plays. He got hurled one time by Kenyon. Not saying these guys aren't playable by any means. I think all of these linebackers are really talented. I just think if I were to, of the guys who played a lot in this game, and we're excluding Bryce and Devin, like I think it's Braden, it's Jerry were the two that really stood out. And if I were to be putting together a linebacker two deep, which I know is something Jared's going to do later this week, those would be two guys that I would probably have there right now. But you can obviously say it's one data point. There's probably a ton of other different things that's happened in camp that shape opinions from the staff. But from just what we watched on Saturday, that's kind of where my head's at.
Yeah, it's still the biggest question mark for me, other than
what we're about
cornerback,
to talk about.
I guess. Yeah, like just who's the second and third string linebackers, or really just the second string, because Oregon doesn't really play that many linebackers. It's just I have a better idea now, and I have a little bit more confidence, but again, it's a spring game, it's a spring practice. I think you have to rely a lot on what you saw physically and how they hit in the open field and everything. It's going to be much different when they go against a different team, because like your teammates' tendencies. Excuse me, but I feel a little bit better now with how Platt and Mixon perform. But biggest question mark, at least for me, for the defense this year, is cornerback and kind of the secondary as a whole, because they have to replace all 5 starting members from last year. Safety. I'm going to start with the safeties because I feel like that's kind of a little bit more set in stone.
Yeah.
Dylan Thieneman,
good
as advertised, didn't really play a lot, but when he did, he was, I think, like 3 of the first 4 plays of the game, he was at or around the ball making a tackle, or the first play of the game made a PBU on an Austin Novosad throw to DeCorian Moore. I think it was DeCorian Moore, if I remember correctly.
You're right. Yep.
Notable that Dylan Thieneman was able to keep up with DeCorian Moore and make a play on the ball. You saw immediately his ability to just play center field and get a jump on the ball and go out and make a play. And then the next play, I think, was a run, and he was one of two people to make the tackle. So he showed off his stuff. Um, and I think Kingston Lopez is going to be the starting boundary safety if it's up to me. I liked what I saw from him. I don't really think that he had too many stats. He just had 3 tackles, but one of them was a really good hit. I can't remember on the running back who it was, but it was one of those where everybody was like, "Ooh," kind of in
I
there.
think it was Noah.
Yeah, it might have been Noah, which again, like Noah's a big boy for a running back. He's like 5'8", 205 pounds, built like a bowling ball. But Lopa, again, 6'4". He's clearly filled out a little bit more physically going in there. And I think those two guys, I feel pretty confident in as your starting safeties. But cornerback, a lot of good,
Mhm.
some bad. I thought Baron Johnson was really fun to watch. I think he was really physical, and I think he'll be one of the starting cornerbacks. And that's kind of how I've had it all off season, I would say, as in my two deep. And then there's like a 12-person battle for the second starting cornerback, and I thought a lot of guys had good days in terms of their pass coverage ability. I thought Jaleel Florence was good, even though he was in a red no contact jersey, and that was just because he had a hand issue, according to Dan, which was good
That's
because
great to hear.
yeah, you're like, all right, is this still the injury he suffered a year and a half ago, or is it something else? And Dan said it was a hand injury, and they didn't want to mess it up, even though you know, Jaleel didn't care. He was up there going for tackles. He was going for PBUs. Like
You know who
he was
didn't
out there playing.
who really didn't care was Noah Whittington, who like on the
Yeah, no
3rd
Whittington
play
did not care.
just tried to body him, and I'm going like, hey, does he not know red contact? I guess he's used to red contact being on his side of the ball, but
Right.
maybe he should identify that Jaleel shouldn't be hit today either.
No, Noah Whittington did not care. But I thought Florence played really well,
Mhm.
honestly. Even though he couldn't like make tackles because of the red shirt and his injury, like he was still good in pass coverage. He had that great play against Kyler Casper. Um, but really, I think some of the younger guys are going to give him a run for his money as the
Yeah.
starting second cornerback. I thought Neem Offord looked good. I thought Ify Obadegwu looked really good. Obviously, he had the forced fumble. Um, I don't like. It's going to be a tough one. Like I like Dorian Brew obviously gave up the touchdown pass to Dylan Gresham, but I still kind of liked what I saw from him. Sione Laulea didn't really play too much. He's kind of nursing an injury. It looks
Yeah.
like. Um, doesn't look like it's anything serious considering that he did start for the white team, but did not play in the second half. Um, but like again, there's 8 dudes who are fighting for that second cornerback position, and I think they all got a lot of talent. It's just going to be, I don't know what's going to be the deciding factor with all of that. If I'm being frank, as I'm looking over and checking the stats to see if I really missed anybody, but it's going to be tough. But I did see a lot of good things, like Liam Offord's end zone PBU. Um, Somebody else, Trey McNutt, who's a safety, got an end zone PBU as
Yeah.
well against Jamari Johnson, the tight end. Um, Solomon Davis, I thought was interesting. He was playing like free safety, boundary safety instead
Yeah,
of star
they're
when he
moving
was
him
on the field,
around.
which was interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what Oregon likes to do, is have um, that versatility in their defensive backfield where all guys are kind of learning the position. And then Dalen Austin, I think, kind of locked up Star as well. I thought he was good. He didn't do too terribly much, but got in on a couple pass rushes, made a couple open field tackles. I think the biggest thing for me was like physically, that's just a different type of cornerback room than it was last season. And like all of the cornerbacks kind of huddled around together at the beginning of the field. And I bumped you, Eric, and I was like, look at those giant freaks over there. Like they're all 6 feet to shoot 6'4" with Sione. So I thought it was encouraging. There's still a lot of question marks, and I have no idea who's going to be the starting second cornerback other than Theron, in my opinion. But they got some dudes now, and that's exactly what we thought going into it. And then they kind of proved it on Saturday.
I think like just a really simplified way to put it is this: like, how many just easy catches did receivers or tight ends have in this game? It just weren't very many. And there were some
Mhm.
incredibly impressive contested catches, and we ran through a lot of those in the receiver section of just guys having to make plays because Like Theron Johnson was all over DeCorian Moore and Dylan Gresham on both of their like highlight reel catches, like
Mhm.
in great coverage position, like right all over him. Guys just made a good play. I think DeCorian got off. Actually, I was encouraged because he's a young guy, but he got away with a little bit of that veteran kind of little paw over to create some space beforehand. But like either way, like Theron was all over him and certainly got the better of some other guys. So I agree. He and Dylan stood out as just the veterans from this group that I think are pretty clearly entrenched in starting roles at this point. Um, I, I I get your Lopa point. I'm not arguing ultimately how it'll play out. I thought Flowers and McNutt played just as well. And these are like
Yep.
McNutt is I don't know what I was expecting, but he's a little bit more explosive, a little bit more athletic in terms of just flying around in coverage, and made some really nice plays. You mentioned the one on the Jamari fade pass that he broke up in the end zone. That was great. Flowers had some. He was around the ball a lot, put it that way, which is what you want to see from a safety. I think he had the most tackles, but
Yeah, I think he had 8.
some pros, some cons. Ends the game with the interception, which was not really like a highlight reel play by any means. I mean, Dante just kind of had to chuck it and he caught it. So not giving him too much credit for that, but wasn't like he, I don't know. That play happened and it counts in the stats here, I guess is what we'll say. Uh, Corner, man. Yeah, I'm with you. I wrote down my 4 kind of standouts from corner were Theron, Iffy, Naeem, and then Jaleel. I just thought those guys separated for me a little bit. You know who didn't have
Mhm.
much of a day was Dakota Fields. I don't like did he play? Like I honestly watching it back, he made either
What
he was
number is
so
he now?
I think
Is he
is he
3?
11? Yeah, he was 11 before. Whatever reason, like either he was so good in coverage that I didn't notice him, or he just wasn't on the field very much. But I didn't pick up on much from Fields at all. Finney had a couple decent moments, but yeah, I to your point, Jared, like there's still 7 or 8 guys that I think could start opposite of me or of Theron Johnson. And shoot, like maybe one of those guys ends up beating Theron Johnson out ultimately. I wouldn't bet on it because I
Right.
think he looks the part and certainly was one of the standouts for me. But there's a lot of names here, man, and it's exciting just to see the size. To your point of like, hey, maybe these guys are going to get beat by Jeremiah Smith based upon route running and what he does after the catch, but they're not going to be a
Who isn't?
situation where you just flick it up in the air and he goes and out leaps 3 guys because he's got 4 inches on him. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
that's no longer the obstacle for these guys in the back end. So yeah, just stylistically looking at these guys, there's so many guys that look the part of NFL type of corners and defensive backs just with the purely based on the size. That's what they've clearly been targeting in recruiting the
Mhm.
last couple of cycles. And just to
Mhm.
see it all come into fruition, you can be. I think there's a lot to like and a lot of reasons to be optimistic about what this group can do.
Yeah, it's a good point about Fields. I remember seeing him on the field. I don't or like pregame, but I don't remember him playing. So maybe he was really sound in pass coverage and nobody ever threw to him, but yeah, I don't necessarily remember him balling out. There's a lot of talent. And that's kind of what we all thought going into the spring game. I don't think I don't think it becomes any clearer who
No.
is going to be the starting secondary or the starting second quarterback other than Theron. And I think Theron is that guy just because of his experience and his talent. Like I think it was an all Big 12 second team last season for Northwestern. Like he's a actually talented player and is going to be the most experienced guy in that room. Considering that Florence hasn't played for a year and a half. If Florence had played all last season, it might be a little different. Where it's like, oh, clearly it's going to be these two, but he's still coming back from injury. We've just seen him for the first time in a long time. And they've also gone out and added some really special talents at the cornerback position. So I think if I had to, really take a guess on the freshman who would make an impact, I think it's Naeem. I think he was the most physically ready and had the best ball skills and the most athleticism out there. And then it was Iffy. Iffy's a guy that didn't play at all last season. And for an injury, not exactly sure, redshirt, whatever the case may be. Um, he looked physically the part, and I don't recall if he had a PBU at all last year, or excuse me, this past spring game. I guess I can look that up right here. Did not. It
Yeah, I
appears
don't
not
think
officially tracked.
he didn't, but he was around the ball all the time, made a lot of plays.
Yeah, forced that fumble on Jay Harris, which is a really good hit on a big boy. Um, he's got to be in the running too. I think those would be my top three of who's going to be the second cornerback.
Well,
Excuse me, Jaleel and Iffy and Dorian, or God, I can't speak, and Naeem.
I was just going to say, if you pressed me on it and I was going to be asked to pick the four, I think Theron on one side. Do we want to? Sione is like, I don't want to not include him in this conversation. He just didn't play much.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
But
I missed him. Yeah,
of guys who played, I'd go Theron. I'd probably have Iffy on the other side, and then to your point, I'd probably go with Naeem and Jaleel. But gosh, it's like now I feel bad for not including Sione Laulea because I would, like you, Jared, think he's really talented and could very well be one of their starters. He just wasn't out there very much. So yeah, it's wacky. We've been doing this for 75 minutes. Do we want to do special teams, Jared, or where are you at? Where do you think the listeners are at right now? Because this is twice as
good
long as I
question.
thought it would go.
We can do quick special teams. I mean, Gage Hirsch,
Yep.
our
Let's just
boy.
let's speed run it. Let's speed run this.
Yeah, 47 and a 54-yard field goal. 54-yard field goal would be top 5 in Oregon program history and longest field goals kicked. So that was something. Joe Lorig said that Atticus Sappington has been trying to improve his distance field goal. He missed from something mid 40s,
46.
46. He missed from that distance, and Gage easily got both of those field goals in from 47 to 54. So that's certainly interesting. Did not have that anywhere on my bingo card in terms of the special teams conversation. And then punting problems, question mark.
What?
I'm not willing to like say that there is a punting problem because we've seen Ross be really good for 2 years now, and maybe he just had a bad day at the office. Um, Maybe he didn't though, depending on what you make of Dan Lanning's comments
Well,
about saying if there's a punter in the portal, we might want to look at that, which was interestingly scrubbed from the official quotes that Oregon put out there. So that was something
I didn't
interesting.
notice that. Okay.
No, you can read my transcript, and those are in there because
What he
it was
said.
very interesting when he said that. And yeah, I mean Ross had like a 13-yard punt. It was just abhorrent. Um, and then Andrew Boyle punting, kicking, doing that thing again. Yeah, I mean there's a little punting problem because there's
Let's
only
stick on
one
that.
true punter on the roster.
Yeah, that's exactly my point. There's only one guy after
Yeah,
Luke Dunn transferred.
and Tyler Kinsman transferred too. And those are two guys that I don't know. I watched a shitload of special teams practice last year, for better or worse. And Luke is a real punter. Like I don't know if he'll be Washington's starting punter because I don't know Washington's football team that well, but he's going to be a competition, that's for sure. He got a couple punts off last year, and then Tyler Kinsman, I thought, always had a good boot in practice. And there's one punter on the roster now. So maybe there is a transfer portal edition that's a punter. Maybe it's for competition purposes. Maybe it's for just purely depth purposes because the other punters were the other kickers. Everybody but Atticus, I think, had a punt Saturday. So I don't know. I think I think Ross is still very good and had a bad day at the office, but that was a bad day. Like
It was
no
tough.
putting it lightly. It was a bad day for Ross.
I think so. Dan's comments are about as direct as I've ever seen him this time of year, talking about any individual position group or player, and kind of stood out to me because I, like you, am willing to say, similar to like Terrence. Someone brought this up on the message board, so I'll use this example, and I apologize for not remembering the name of the poster. But someone said, "Well, let's not be too alarmist because last year, remember Terrence Ferguson dropped like 2 or 3 passes, a couple in big spots, and people were like, what's going on?" And then he comes out and breaks the school record for, tight end play, basically,
Right.
as goes in the second round of the NFL draft. This is a really good player. Let's not get on Ross James for, he had 3 punts. One was fine. One was kind of off the side of the foot, but still went 40 yards. And the other one was a total shank. Like, let's not completely write this guy off. But then I go, did Dan kind of write him, not write him off, but like kind of suggested that there's a problem here because of what he said post game. And then if you also pay attention, Ross had his shank right before the end of the first half, and then he didn't punt again the rest of the game. They went
Yeah.
all Andrew, all Gage, all the time in the second half. And frankly, those guys didn't perform that much better. I've got the splits here pulled up on my story here. Yeah, Boyle 35.3 yards per punt. Hurich 39.7. I think he had clearly the best punt of the day. It was like a 50-yarder, just dead center, a lot of space to work with. Hit it pretty clean. But my thing with both Boyle and Hurich is they didn't have any shanks. But if you're not shanking the ball and averaging 35 and 39 yards per punt, you're not punting the ball very accurately unless it's all directional punting, which only one of those combined 6 punts were. So this is something that I expect now, based on what Dan said, I expect them to have a new punter on this team. I have no idea, obviously, who that will be. I haven't scouted punting prospects yet, but
No, you haven't.
You can certainly anticipate that they're going to add something. I as much as I take Dan's word for they're not going to hit linebacker, I'm taking his word that punter is something they're really looking at. And again, not to be too alarmist, I get it. You have one punter, and the guy you thought was going to be your guy went out there and kind of embarrassed himself in front of everybody, and also wasn't very good the last time against Ohio State in the Rose Bowl. So I don't want to make it too big of a thing, but that was like low key, very interesting that Dan really went that way with it.
Yeah, I've never seen him do something like that. It was intriguing to say the least. He's never flat out like that was like a Nick Saban kind of rant.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we're not taking any linebackers, but I tell you what, our punting stinks, so we might look in the portal there. It's like without all the other fill-in words that Saban would use. It was the only time I've ever seen Dan direct about a lot of things. Like
personnel for sure, the most direct he's ever been.
Yeah. Because it'll usually be like, we like what we got at this room, and then they add somebody to that room through the portal. It's like, oh, so you like what you got? Okay, cool, yeah. But this was clearly like, I don't know, I don't think he likes what he has in that punting room right now. And again, I think Ross is a good punter. It's just
school record holder.
There's one dude in the room, and like you said with the other dudes who were punting, like 35 yards ain't gonna cut it. It's simple as that. Like that's like what Alex Bales was averaging like for his short run of punting. I hope he's doing well. Good Cincinnati guy. But it might be it might be something to keep an eye on.
Let's just hope this isn't 2022 all over again. The last time, by the way, Andrew Boyle punted in an Oregon football game was 2022. Didn't go great then. Didn't go as bad as others, but
no,
they got some issues here. It's spring. There's plenty of time to figure it out. But and I guess this is just a good place to close. I was talking to a buddy of mine, a Washington fan. He was asking me what I thought of the spring game. I said, I think the team's pretty good. If my biggest gripe coming out is that punting isn't very good, and that was kind of where I landed. Like there was some offensive line stuff, and we kind of hit that. But if you come out of this being like, our punting is a problem, and that's like the biggest concern, like you have a pretty darn good football team, I think.
Yeah, and again, like all these guys who are on the field play for the same team. Like they were split up, but all the bad things about the offensive line gets completely wiped away when the starters are out there on the field for 99.9% of the snaps. Punting is a little bit different, and we'll see how everything goes over the course of the season. But all these guys play on the same team, and that's really nice when you have all these standout guys, and you're like, oh yeah, no, they're not gonna be on the other team. They're gonna be playing for the team I'm rooting for. So that's really beneficial. But yeah, we'll see with the punting. I might have to do some scouting here over the next couple of days and target somebody. Maybe write a shell or something like that.
By Friday we'll have a list of a hot board for the top punting prospects available for Oregon. We'll get one of those.
We'll get Cooper Patagna on the show to break him down.
If there's anybody who would know, that's our guy.
That is our guy. All right. Anything else?
I am all spent. I did 4,000 words on the spring game yesterday, and then we just did basically 90 minutes today on a podcast form. So I feel like we've spring gamed plenty, and I think our listeners are probably begging us to wrap this up. So let's go ahead and do that.
Stop. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. If you're listening, thank you for making it all the way through the podcast. Please leave a like, comment, a 5-star review wherever you're listening to your podcast. We greatly appreciate that. I'm not sure when the next time we'll be back on the show is. I don't know. Maybe something baseball oriented after weekend against Michigan State. Maybe there's equipment. Maybe there's a punter who comes
Mm-hmm.
aboard. Maybe something like that. But
Emergency
uh,
pod.
yeah. But for Erik Skopil, I'm Jared Mack. Thank you for listening to the Autzen Audibles podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.